Hi there, and welcome to episode 24 of the Sage Running Podcast. We're going to have a special guest on today. Well, she's kind of the co-host as well of the Sage Running Podcast. Coach Sandi Nypaver of SageRunning.com, athlete who just came back from the Grand Canyon. We're going to talk about her run at the rim to rim to rim, going after the women's speed record, the FKT. A couple attempts into that, as well as the end of her whole season, and kind of maybe the process after coming off of Achilles tendon surgery, being a coach and an elite level mountain ultra trail athlete. We'll talk into that and any other questions we tweeted out to answer, training questions, things like that, more about her background and rise in the sport. But we'll welcome Sandi Nypaver in this episode 24 Sage Running Podcast. Here we go. Welcome back to the Sage Running Podcast. Special guests on today, Sandi Nypaver. Sandi, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here always, and really appreciate you taking the time. So we'll plug some sponsors first, actually. So what are we drinking here? Do you already have a sip of that?
Yeah. Gotta get rid of my podcast nerves.
It's the Avery. Well, you're on a break now from running, and I had to take a couple days off after that running the canyon. But the Avery Rumpkin, it's kind of a seasonal special barrel-aged beer, ale brewed with pumpkin spices, aged in rum barrels. I believe it was aged for several months, if not several years. It's 16.3% alcohol, so you got to share. This is a split beer, so cheers. Cheers to that. Avery Brewing out of Boulder, Colorado. Delicious beverage. But your title sponsor, of course, you could go ahead and plug Rabbit.
Yeah, really honored to be a Rabbit athlete. Really good company, and then sponsored by Everyday Adventure Treats, so both of us are, and then Tailwind and Ultimate Direction.
Yeah, Tailwind Nutrition there. So, great support, and you've been tearing up the trail scene this year. I mean, we'll get into the specifics of the Grand Canyon run that we just did a couple of days ago, but we could start with...
We should mention this is your idea. I feel silly just talking about myself, but...
I think you guys...
going along with it.
If you want, I mean, you're basically co-coach at SageRunning.com, co-founder of SageRunning.com, so it's kind of a behind-the-scenes look of one of the owners. And but I think basically what I've seen is some running media is you won the Rut 50K a couple months ago, the Rut 50K in Montana, which is it's a big deal race. It's one of the most technical mountain 50Ks, if not the most technical mountain 50K in the U.S. It's a really big race in Montana, high altitude, technical, good mix of runnable, single track. It's been in the Skyrunning series a lot. Actually, it was the Skyrunning World Final when I raced Killian there like 4 years ago. But you've got all these big names from Europe that have come over and raced that course. You've got a lot of really top runners that have raced that course. And it's traditionally really competitive. But you not only won this year, you also set the course record. And if you look at the list of all the top-level international women, really, really good women that have run there, you beat their time.
There was one year where it was a bad weather year and they changed the course. So I don't know, like maybe some of the one from that year could have been faster on the course I ran, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, my point is you've been running super strong, especially at the end of this season. And you were running strong last year too. If we rewind back, I guess, you making the U.S. mountain running team, but even before that, 3 years ago, to having Achilles tendon surgery and kind of where you came from. If you kind of talk about that progression maybe before we get into the Canyon talk.
Well, even last year was really rough with my Achilles, and it hurts so bad. Even during the mountain races I tried, where like I could run on it for a little bit, and then after like 5,000 feet or so, which is a lot, but in a mountain race you probably still have 5,000 feet plus to go, like it would just kind of like give out. And so I kind of like felt like I was using my left leg just as like a post in the ground that I was like swinging off of, instead of like actually being able to like engage like my calf muscle and my glute muscles and everything like that. So to have that fixed this year and be able to have all the power in my left leg, I felt like made a huge difference. But yeah, like it was really hard to have Achilles surgery, and then I had an okay year after that, and then last year just feel like I was gonna have to have surgery again. Because it was even worse. Like, I can even run downhill without being in a lot of pain. And I was like, still loved running, but I started dreading going out for a run because I knew how bad it was gonna hurt. And for a while, like, it would just go away after maybe like 10 minutes or so, and then it just wouldn't go away at all. And I'm like, I'm screwed. And I was positive I was have to have a second surgery.
So yeah, major surgery, Achilles tendon you don't want to mess with. And that was 3 years ago, and we went to, it was in the spring, and that summer we went to Chamonix I was training for UTMB, and you were hiking around, probably too much vertical too soon, but
Probably.
it's a fine line between trying to get mobility and flexibility back in the Achilles tendon versus trying to strengthen your calf muscle again, because you had some atrophy with the calf muscle, the back of your leg, but you're doing calf raises and things like that. How did you overcome that then if you were worried about getting surgery again, fixing your running form, things like that?
Well, I think it's very important to know with all injuries, especially feet and ankle injuries, that if you have like a chronic injury, it's very easy for your body to form new patterns to try to protect itself. And that can be good at first because your body's trying to help you out. But if you don't change back to moving correctly, that's where the issue arises. And that was my problem. And it was interesting because we filmed me running, and it didn't look like anything was seriously wrong. But finally, last October, I went to see Center for Sports Medicine, and I saw a physical therapist who also specializes in gait analysis there. And she had me go on a treadmill, and she watched me run. She filmed it, and we played it back in really slow motion. And she's like, you look good, but you're just doing this really slight thing with your foot and maybe your hip. And I think that's causing a lot of torque on your Achilles. And she told me just to focus on doing a couple of things differently with my foot and how I moved my hip. She thought I was bringing out just a little instead of bringing it straight up and then straight back. And sure enough, it started slowly getting better after that. But I should also say before that, I went to tons and tons of physical therapists to try to figure this out. And they all told me like, oh, you're doing everything right. Like, tendons just take a really long time to heal, and because there's not much blood flow to the area. And so I just kind of listened to them thinking it was going to get better, but then it never did. And finally, I saw a physical therapist who actually watched me run, and it made all the difference. So now with the athletes I coach, I'll be pretty adamant about getting a second opinion or finding somebody who specializes with runners or endurance athletes and actually takes the time to watch an athlete run. And, it sounds like it should be common sense, but unfortunately it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And with athletes we coach, we do look at the treadmill running form analysis and, figure out what shoes you're wearing. There's also some genetic factors with your running form, your susceptibility to injury. But then it all kind of ties together with lifestyle factors, right? How much time you spend sitting, how your age, chronological age, but also running age, nutrition and diet, sleep, recovery. But like you said, with those little tweaks in running form, especially when you're coming off of an injury, that could, it's all a chain reaction of motion, basically. Chicken or the egg, does it come from the foot up? Does it come from the hip down? Is it because you have a weak core? And I know watching you train, working really hard, you spend a lot of time on the core exercises. You have your YouTube channel, Running Wild to Believe. You got a lot of videos on how to strengthen that core area, activate the glutes, stretch out the hip flexors, work on the abdominal muscles in your stomach, things like that. So I think you've really paid attention a lot and focused on that over the years, and that's also helped you overcome this major surgery and this injury, and being able to transform your running form so that you're more efficient and you're able to train at a really high level. And you've been training at a really high level this year, and the race results have been showing it. So
yeah, but I will say, like, as much I love researching like how to move or different like scientific studies, like anything with movement or running. And, I thought I knew a lot, or I could fix issues myself, or just like the physical therapist help I saw before. And then, it didn't work. And so sometimes, as much as I think I'd like to know a lot, if there's probably an expert who actually knows more. And I also struggled, like many athletes, to justify the cost of going to see an expert. Because I'm just a pretty frugal person, and I know from some athletes I work with that they're the same way, where they kind of dread going to get the help they need, and just thinking like, oh, it'll go away, or I'll try this on my own and see what happens, and the injury just drags out way longer than it needs to. And so lesson learned there, and hopefully I can be a better coach because of it.
Yeah. And with the medical costs, of course, we did go outside of the country to get your surgery done, and it ended up being less expensive, even including the travel. But that's kind of a side topic we don't need to go into. But we'll talk about your progression, your year. You made the world mountain running team earlier this year. Mm-hmm. You qualified for it at the Moab Trail Marathon with your performance there. You had a lot of top performances last year, and then to represent the world U.S. mountain running team at the long distance challenge in Poland earlier this spring. But of course you had an injury there.
Which was also, it doesn't seem related to my Achilles, but it was. I'll just go into that really quick. A week before the world champs, I hurt my back, and it wasn't just a little pain. It was just like, I run, especially downhill, and it was excruciating, and I knew something was, like, it felt like something was seriously wrong. And I thought it was just like this freak accident that happened a week before the race. But then again, I went back to CU, Center for Sports Medicine, and saw another woman her name was Sue Torrance. And she realized, like, maybe from my Achilles injury, I was also still having trouble using other parts of my left leg correctly, specifically my glutes. And so what she believed happened, I was probably like running downhill, and my glute wasn't helping me stabilize properly on the downhill. And so my back muscles were trying to pick up some slack, and then they were just overworking, and I don't know, maybe something like slipped out of place, and it just kind of threw my entire back off. And I couldn't run for a few weeks after that. But then Sue gave me a couple exercises to do, and within a week I was back running, and just it's all because I was learning how to restabilize my glutes. And so I really think it was a blessing in disguise, because pain is a great teacher, and after that I felt like I was running downhill better than I had in quite a while.
Yeah, and I think especially with that course in Poland, it's a lot of like rocky road steps. It was more of
it's like a cobblestone
road with some really steep long downhills. It wasn't like a traditional single track dirt mountain trail type of thing. But anyway, and it was that was a tough go for you. But it showed that your fitness was there. You made the U.S. team. You were climbing really well on the uphills when you didn't have to worry about the gravitational force and the back torquing. I think maybe it was your SI joint too. But then you figured out how to activate your glutes, dialed in your form, recovered from that, and then had a great training block this summer, mountain running for the Rut 50K to get that performance, win that race. And then that's carried over now into the Grand Canyon rim to rim to rim run. And we'll talk about that now mostly. I think that's the big thing you just accomplished a couple days ago, but also the first attempt, the recon attempt about a month ago, because originally you were planning on racing the North Face 50 mile in San Francisco this past weekend, which of course was canceled because of all the horrible wildfires they've had there, and rightfully so. So many tragic events unfolding with the wildfires, and people that lost their lives and lost their homes, and just really tough circumstances, and the air quality all over the state being really bad. So it was good to see that a lot of donations were going in towards that effort. But because there wasn't a race, you still wanted to do a hard effort, and that's what led to the Grand Canyon. But we could talk about the first attempt, your recon attempt, or even 7 years ago when you visited the Grand Canyon for the first time, what you thought, and kind of how that process came about.
I don't know, where should I begin?
I mean, you first looked at the canyon and set foot on part of it 7 years ago, right?
Correct. Yeah.
But you didn't do the rim to rim to rim, which is south rim, well, traditionally south rim to north rim, and then back again. It's roughly 44 miles with over 10,000 feet of climbing. So I'm going to try to convert that to metric now. 44 miles is like 20, dang it. 20K. It's like 70K.
Maybe you need another sip of your beer and you'll figure it out.
It's like, I'll get on my calculator here. So yeah, you ran down to Phantom Ranch though.
No, not the first time. The first time, it's kind of a long story, but I really just like looked at the Grand Canyon and walked around the rim for a little bit. But at that time, I was fairly recently graduated from college and from the Midwest in Ohio, and I had never seen anything like the Grand Canyon, and it just totally took my breath away.
It's one of those places. If you haven't been to there, I'm usually like, oh, I'm not that impressed with natural landscapes always because, there's a lot of cool stuff out there around the world, and so I was like, oh, I guess I'll go to the Grand Canyon as an adult. But when you actually step out on the edge of the rim for the first time and you look out at even just part of the canyon, it's pretty amazing. Like pictures never do it justice. You see the pictures, you see the videos, but when you're standing on the edge, it's just like, wow, this is an amazing wonder. Right. And it's kind of out, it's pretty isolated. I mean, we always travel up through Phoenix and Flagstaff, but like there's no real big towns very close to the canyon, especially like the North Rim. So you're kind of out there. And it's there's a lot of tourists, of course, but it's magnificent, and there's not as many people that actually venture down into the bottom of the canyon on these really, really cool trails with a good variety. But it's a challenging route, and it's a hard line. And you had never done the pull to the North Rim until last month, right?
Right, yeah. Not early October.
So that was the original attempt. I mean, you had it in the back of your mind. The FKT, or the fastest known time for women across the canyon, was set by local boulder athlete and a friend of ours, Kat Bradley, after she won Western States. I believe, was it 2 years ago? She won Western States that summer.
So
Okay.
A year and a half.
Oh yeah, it was only a year and a half ago. She won Western States, and then her next big effort after winning Western States that summer, she went down in the fall and after 2 attempts lowered the rim to rim record in the canyon to 7 hours and 52 minutes. And I just converted it. It is about 70 kilometers, over 10,000 feet of climbing, so over 3,000 meters of climbing. And of course, it's an inverse mountain. You start up high, you start up close to 8,000 feet on the south rim. You go down 5,000 feet basically, and then you start a slow climb. It's a little more gradual, but then it kicks up again. So it's an inverse mountain, right? You got big downhill, flatter part, big uphill, then you reverse it. So it's like this reverse U when you look at the elevation profile on Strava, at least. But she had lowered that record to 752, and a month ago that was the record, and that's what you were going for. But that first attempt a month ago, it had rained. We ran into mules. Actually, there's a YouTube video on my channel, VO2 Max Productions, of that recon mission, so to speak. Because if you don't know what you're getting into in the canyon, it's hard to run as fast as you can there to feel it. So what were your first impressions going to the North Rim that time a month ago?
Yeah, like compared to this time, the North Rim experience last time was totally different because we ran into a mule train, or twice, because once on the way up and then back down, and then because of the rain, the trail is just crap. And I kind of like hard terrain sometimes, but when you're going fast for a record, you don't want it to be muddy, or you just want it to be the best conditions possible, and that's not how it was. It was definitely a slog because of all the rain.
Yeah, I've only done the North Rim a couple of times, but it was definitely really muddy on the North Rim, and the mules were not helping. There were a couple mule trains coming down. They're going to the bathroom all over the trail. It actually kind of it was a lot of excrement. I'll put it that way. And we're also waiting for them a lot on the switchbacks on the North Rim, which you usually don't expect when you hear about the mule trains. You mainly think of the South Kaibab Trail, Kaibab, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, to Phantom Ranch, or even up Bright Angel, I think they go. But the FKT route is South Kaibab to the North Rim and back the way you came. And you definitely want good conditions. You're fighting water stops along the way. There's not very much drinkable, potable water. There's not very much infrastructure down in the bottom of the canyon. You could be running for a half hour at a time and not see anybody. And if you do see someone, they've probably been hiking for hours or running for hours. So if you run into trouble, it could get very tough, and it's a very dry, deserty environment. The temperature swings are huge. We started at the crack of dawn a month ago, right? We wanted to beat the first mule train down, basically. Didn't want to get stuck behind a mule train. So you're starting in the dark with a headlamp.
It's freezing
It's freezing cold because you're up at 8,000 feet, or what is that in meters? 2,000 meters, 2,500 meters. It's ballparking it there. So yeah, it's below freezing on top. There could be snow and ice, and then you get down in the canyon, the sun rises, and you get this huge temperature swing where you're hot and sweaty even in short sleeves, and you get really thirsty and dehydrated. And you could, if you were really desperate, you'd bring cash and you could buy maybe supplies at Phantom Ranch, but after that, you're on your own.
Yeah, to run it fast is logistically pretty challenging. Maybe not compared to like other sports, but for trail running, like you have to have at this point in time to run the Grand Canyon fast and possibly set an FKT. It requires a lot of help and a good amount of planning.
Yeah, no, it's definitely logistical, and you see that with the records now, as they've gotten more and more competitive, and it's become this really established FKT. People are out there with a lot of their friends supporting them. They're out there with film crews and camera crews, and everything's streamlined, but it's a really tough line to do.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the past women who have set the record there, like you have to give them credit. Like they may have not had all the help because back then you could still get away with refilling water by yourself, and it was normally not a focus. It's like just squeezed in between races, and so it's not that the women who ran it before like were running very well. Just they didn't have quite the same support.
Yeah, and like with the water, like they actually start shutting off water because it's getting cold. They're worried about the pipes freezing, so to not have that water shut off on the north rim and to not be able to fill up there is really key. Whereas if you had a friend, someone out there on the north rim that could give you water, that's something that you need when you're going for a record type of run, because it just depends on the timing there. If they shut off that water, you have no water in the north rim, you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're probably super thirsty. And all the people that have been setting these records and doing this will have usually someone there, if not filming, taking epic pictures on the north rim and things like that. So it's become a really competitive record. And so the record is 7:52 a month ago. Even a week ago, it was 7:52, 7 hours 52 minutes for women. And
then the North Face got canceled.
The North Face was canceled, but you were in peak shape. A lot of top women were in peak shape for this weekend in North Face. International runners, top U.S. runners. So all of a sudden, it became a thing maybe that a lot of these top women were looking at trying to set a FKT or record at the Grand Canyon. And one of them, Ida Nelson.
Total fangirl.
She's one of your inspirations.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, so if you don't know who Ida is, you definitely should know, but she's basically one of the top mountain ultra trail runners in the world, actually all around runners in the world, any service, any distance. She's been running competitively in mountain ultra trail races at a really, really high level for the last 3-4 years. But she's actually, if you look back on her history, she ran for Northern Arizona in Flagstaff, Arizona, was a 2-time Division I NCAA national champion at the 3K steeplechase, and as well as the 5K, indoor 5K, I believe. So she ran 15:33 for 5,000 meters, and I think it was around 9:30 for the 3K steeple, maybe 9:40. It was a Swedish national record at the time. So she's an extremely fast runner, had the track speed, had some injury issues, but then got into ski mountaineering.
She has a good story. I think Iron Farr did a good article on her, and I really suggest looking that up and just also follow her on Instagram or Facebook, whatever. Give her as much props and kudos as possible.
Yeah, and I saw her kicking butt at the Golden Trail Series this year. She's won Transvolcania Ultramarathon 3 times.
3 times in a row.
She's won the 50K. She's won the North Face 50-mile endurance championship in San Francisco. She also won Zagama this year.
So let's mention that. She won Zagama, which is one of the most competitive trail races that isn't an ultra out there. 1 week after she won Transvolcania this year. Like, that's just, I can't imagine doing that.
I think her brother just set a national record in the half marathon for Sweden. I think he ran about a 1:02 last weekend as well. Very talented family, great person. We love Ida. She's a great friend and
she's really a sweetheart.
An inspiration. So she goes out there on Friday. We'd already canceled our plane tickets to San Francisco. We've traveled out to do the Grand Canyon. There was talk of other women doing the record that very same weekend. We're thinking we're going to run into a lot of friends out there. in the Grand Canyon, because it's still a good time of the year to do it. It's a little late in the season, but it's still doable.
But then again, I think November is the perfect time to do it. Like the weather's good. There's less people, especially on the North Rim, because the North Rim closes after, I don't remember when, but the North Rim, it was, I don't want to say it was closed, but it was closed. Like the ranger station was closed and the water was turned off. So there weren't many people on the North Rim.
Yeah, well, but for people that might be interested in doing it, though, they want to probably do it a couple weeks earlier because they shut off water on the North Rim, and that changes with the weather. So definitely, like, early November is probably a good time to do it, because the other thing you're avoiding for these record attempts, and you see all the records happen in late October, early November, or you see them happen in April or May, is because it gets extremely hot on the canyon floor anytime in the summer. So you wouldn't want to do it then. And then, of course, in the winter, you could have snow on both rims, and it's extremely cold on the rims. So that was kind of the timing issue. But yeah, we traveled out to Flagstaff 2 nights before. You'd planned to do it on a Sunday just because of the logistics, the travel, the cost of plane tickets and all that. But Ida was coming back from, she had been in Flagstaff, actually, I think.
Yeah,
and
she was staying there for at least 2 weeks.
So we're there on Friday, and we find out that she went out that Friday last week and shattered the record. She lowered it from 752 to 729. So you're looking at a good 23-minute drop. Yeah, I guess it depends on the seconds. But yeah, over 20-minute drop, 21, 20, 22, 23-minute drop off of Kat Bradley's record, which was a strong record already. So
I do want to give Kat a little bit more. Well, she already gets a lot of credit, but just to be fair to Kat, I know she had some big stomach issues in the second half of her attempt, and she had said in her write-up she thought the record could be significantly lowered because I don't think she ate anything the past couple hours or the last couple hours of her run. So I'm sure Kat could run faster too.
So yeah, we knew though before you started, 2 days before you were going to do this attempt, that the record just got lowered. It just got a lot harder. 729. What was the seconds on it?
16.
729.16.
I'll admit, I think with both of us, there was a bit of a jaw drop there where it's like, shit.
I think there's a jaw drop with a lot of people in the mountain ultra trail running community, because that's flying for rim to rim to rim, and she went out there and smashed it. So like, yeah, what goes through your mind when you heard that news and we still had to go into this?
Yeah,
we didn't have to. You chose to.
Yeah, honestly, I think over the last few years, I started believing myself quite a bit more. But at the same time, I still do. I think of Ida as a level above me. And so when I saw that, I'm like, there's no way. And that was my initial thought for like the first 20 minutes or so. I'm like, oh, maybe this is a really bad idea and I should just cancel it. But then I thought, well, maybe I could get close. And if I don't break it, maybe I could still just see how fast I could run compared to her. And Rabbit will have my whole blog post explaining why I even wanted to run the Grand Canyon in the first place. And if you read that, you'll realize it was important to me to run a fast time there. And so I knew I had to go for it after a while. And it took a lot of reassurance. Yeah, sorry. Maybe the tweak's getting to me. Yeah, and like, yeah, I've been texting my sister, like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, you have to go for it. And that was what my heart and even my mind is telling me, that I had to give myself a chance and believe in myself enough to think maybe I could come close.
And like you just said, you articulated it very well in the written blog post that'll be featured by your sponsor, Rabbit. We'll have the links to their social media handles. There also is going to be a little promo video as well, I think, on the Instagram. You can follow them on Instagram, Twitter. We'll have the links below for Rabbit, your primary sponsor, as well as their website or the blog link when it's published. Actually, just a minute here. All right, we're back. I did reset the camera there. always goes off after 30 minutes. I don't know why. It's a Canon Rebel T5i. Someone could help me with that. I don't think it's the SD card, but yeah. So anyway, the links for all your social sponsors and that blog post will be in the description below for Rabbit, and the promo video as well. And I'll have some video footage that I took on the GoPro on my channel, YouTube. Well, you're already here if you're watching the YouTube VO2 Max Productions of some of the footage of your run, but we'll get into the details of the run and what went down.
I'll ask you a question. So what did you think when Ida set the record? And knowing I was going for it too.
Well, I knew she was probably going to be someone that would lower the record because she's such a phenomenal athlete. And I know she had experience in the canyon, going to school in Flagstaff. She knew the environment pretty well. And being a phenomenal mountain runner, dialed in for the 50 mile at North Face. I wasn't surprised. I was surprised with the time. It was a lot of time to take off the record, and it was a really fast time. So, but I had confidence in you. I knew how fit you were, and I knew how much you wanted it, and I know how tough you are, that I said, okay, it's going to be really tough to beat that FKT now, but I truly believe that you could do it. I knew it would take a perfect day, though, and I knew that you could have a really, really strong run and you'd still smash your personal best and you'd still run significantly under 8 hours. And so it was exciting to see that, you were going to be up for the challenge, because it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of guts to go out there and commit to something like that, because it's going to hurt, it's going to push you to your absolute limit. And you've announced it kind of ahead of time, at least to some people. They know you're going to be out there doing it. And so there's pressure on you. It's like pressure, like being in a race. So it's tough. And, you set big, hairy, audacious goals like that. And I think that's a big part of the sport. It's inspirational to see. And you're basically chasing after your dreams. And even if you fall short, you're still up there, still a lot of self-improvement and a lot of positives to be gained. So I knew it was going to be really, really tough. And I was hoping you could do it. But at the same time, I knew that, just finishing it is quite an accomplishment. We have questions coming in on Twitter as well about what it takes for, a mid-packer to finish the rim to rim to rim and stuff like that. We could get into in a bit, but anything else you wanted to add to going into the attempt before we dive into the details of what went down?
Yeah, since you mentioned all that, I will say I'm not somebody who likes to ask for help. I've learned over my life to be extremely independent. And so asking people to help me, knowing I couldn't repay it, was very challenging, because I can't repay people for their time. And I can't repay you for sacrificing your own training to run over an ultra when your longest run up until that point was 10 miles. I'm getting emotional thinking about it, but what an amazing gift to give somebody, to take your own time to support and believe in them. Especially growing up, I didn't feel like I had that. And so just to have that now in my life, it really meant the world to me.
No, that's a great point, and it just shows how important it is and how passionate you could get about this sport. A lot of us do it for fitness and exercise, or just to finish a certain distance, but it's become ingrained in your lifestyle. And as a coach, you see the sacrifice that a lot of our athletes make. They sacrifice balancing family life and work and job.
Those who support us make, as I said, you ran 30 miles. You weren't ready for that, and you're beat up. And then my crew, I know, they were on the North Rim. They're so busy right now, and they still took pretty much over a day's worth of their time to drive out to the North Rim to help me. And again, I can't repay people for their time, and I'll never forget that, especially this time of year when people are thinking giving of gifts for Christmas and what to get people. There's no better gift than supporting some people in their dreams.
Yeah, the generosity of the running community could be really amazing, and it's definitely been a big positive impact in our lives. So it's something I'm also thankful for, but could really tell that it's a big deal, and it's really important, I think, in life to have that, even outside of a sport like running. But since running is our thing, We got some questions. Part of it was that, yeah, the idea of will you try it again? I guess we could answer these after we talk about the details of the run. So let's get into that. We started at 6:10 a.m. on Sunday morning, November 18th, a couple of days ago. And it was pretty cold on the South Rim. It was dark. But we wanted to meet that first mule train down to Phantom Ranch. And like Sandy said, I'm not in shape to do the full pull. She would drop me. I was not ready to go up to the North Rim, so I was only going to be running part of the way with her. But it was still going to be an ultra for me. And since my injury, I haven't been running a lot. I had to take some time off and been running flat for months, and I haven't done much vertical, and this is a lot of vertical. So we do that. We're doing that first descent in the dark. I'm only going to go with you going out 16 miles or so before the North Rim really kicks up. What's going through your head? What are you thinking? We're descending these stairs. There's a lot of stairs on South Kaibab. It's kind of dusty and dry. No mules, though. Got our headlamps on.
I think that first descent was my favorite part because I love downhills that I can run, but are technical enough where like they really keep things interesting and you have to focus. And then the sun was rising, and every now and then there was a smoother part where I could look up and just see the sunrise in the canyon. And just having you with me, it just felt like I was pushing really hard on the downhill, but at the same time, like it was really fun. And that was by far my favorite part of the
I'll run
day.
some video clips on the YouTube video here for those of you watching on YouTube. You could kind of see some of those shots in the dark going down South Kaibab, and then coming out with the sun slowly getting a little bit lighter. I think I turned my headlamp off right before we got to the river. There's a big bridge there. It's kind of iconic, and that's where we take a lot of splits, actually. So you're down there just under, can I say the split? Just under.
Oh, yeah.
It was all on Strava, actually. She's got the Strava data. GPS is not always really accurate in the canyon, though, so that's another thing that throws you off. But we know what time's running. We know we start at 6:10 a.m. We got the stopwatch going. You're at the bridge just under 51 minutes. I think Ida hit there in 49 minutes, maybe 50 minutes. So we knew it was a good pace. It was a hot pace. It was not relaxed. We had some 7-minute miles down that technical trail in the dark. It did not feel good to me. My quads are already screaming at me. But yeah, it's exciting to get down there and be able to turn the headlamps off. Instantly started getting warm too, which is surprising because it was probably below freezing when we started on top. It was quite cold.
Yeah, I had a few layers on.
Yeah, so you quickly get down there. It's a 6-mile descent, almost 5,000 feet of downhill. And like you said, some technical parts, but also some runnable parts and dry, kind of some loose dirt, rock, sand. You get a difference in surfaces. But you get down to Phantom Ranch, and then it's a little more flat up towards the Box Canyon area, I believe. But yeah, just tell us about running on the bottom of the canyon along the river there. What was going through your mind at mile 7 to 17, basically?
Yeah, so basically you do the 5,000 feet descent, and then you have to be ready to run at a good clip. And as you were saying before, like it starts off as a pretty runnable trail, and it kind of just gradually gets steeper as you go. And yeah, like I just knew I had to push as hard as I could the entire way to even come close to Ida. And honestly, like I know for me, when I'm going at the right pace, it's those thoughts quietly coming in that like, oh, like maybe you should stop, or maybe it's not my day, or maybe I should get a ride back on the North Rim. But if they're quietly coming in, I know that's exactly where I need to be. Or if they're like, those thoughts are like shouting at me, like, oh, you need to stop, then I'm probably going too fast. But I've had those thoughts come kind of like creeping in. I'm like, okay, I know what to do here. I know I'm at the right pace. I need to refocus. As we always tell our athletes, there's always something good to focus on. Or sometimes it's better to look at the trail right in front of you and try not to think. And honestly, that's what I did most of the time, was attempt not to think. Because when I did think every now and then, like it was fairly painful the entire time. Yeah, and then it's like 15 or 16 miles of uphill straight. Like it's not something you want to think about. Like you have to break it down.
Now I know what it's like to run an ultra with no training. It hurts. But anyway, you're saying don't think, basically. Don't think, be in the moment, because break it down into smaller portions. If you think of the task at hand, like I know it's a brutal line. You get to the North Rim and you're like, gosh, now I have to turn around and do the same thing backwards. Like, I think we got questions pouring in with your fuel strategy, or what were you taking during this? How is it different than a 7-hour race, or would you say it's comparable?
It's no, it's comparable. Comparable. I used Tailwind the entire time. Sometimes I did have plain water, a little bit on the North Rim, just to get a different taste in my mouth. But I really like. Obviously, I'm sponsored by Tailwind or an ambassador for them, and I'm not saying this just to promote them, but I do not like messing around with gels when I'm running, especially on downhill. Like I rather just get in my electrolytes, my calories, and the water all in at once. And so that way, like I'm not running and trying to tear open a gel. And I also, like I used to have really bad stomach problems during races, and I've dropped out of races because I was just puking my guts out. And Tailwind, it works with me really well, and it gave me all the electrolytes I needed, it gave me all the calories I needed, and it just made it super simple and easily digested the entire time.
Do you have a code for people?
No code. Sorry, guys.
I have to edit that part out. Anyway, so yeah, that was, you got to the North Rim. Would you split at the North Rim, if you don't mind sharing?
I split the North Rim, maybe it's like 3:39, 40-ish. Maybe a little bit before that. But I didn't leave the North Rim till a little bit after 3:40, and that's because I pushed really hard on the final couple miles up the North Rim because it gets really steep, and I knew I needed to run it as much as possible. So it took a lot of focus, and like I was feeling pretty taxed by the time I got to the top. So I took a moment, I drank some water, I took a deep breath, and like within a few seconds, because I took the time to do that, I felt refocused and was pumped about the downhill. And then I could just start running really fast because I took that moment.
Makes sense. And the interesting thing is, like, it's a net uphill, actually. The North Rim is a little bit higher than the South Rim, and you've done a lot of climbing to get up there. And you're halfway done, but usually every record attempt has been a big positive split. So you get to the North Rim, you don't just double your time back. You think, okay, I'm going to try not to slow down too much, but everyone who's set records and most people that do the rim to rim to rim, they get to the North Rim pretty fast, but then the second way back is slower, even though it's a net downhill. And if you're talking about just rim to rim record, it is faster to start at the North Rim and just run south. But since you're doing rim to rim to rim, you got to do a lot of climbing at the end, no matter which way you go. But it is usually a big positive split. So you kind of know that in your head, that you're not going to run an even split on the way back, even though the effort is way, way harder, probably.
Yeah, I wish I would have split the North Rim a couple of minutes faster. But at the same time, after I took that moment at the top and like regained composure, I felt really good. I'm like, there's a chance I might be able to negative split this.
Yeah, I mean, because if you do the math on it, to run under 7:30, you need to average 3:45s. Mm-hmm. So you were at 3:40, 3:39. Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say I should negative split, but I thought I could run pretty fast.
Yeah, if you run more even splits, you could come back, even coming back in 3:50 would have been, well, it's about what you ran, but it's tough though, because it's going to get warmer, you're going to get more fatigued. And what I remember from last month when you did it is that you flew off the North Rim, like you flew down that trail. And there's some cliffs you could fall and die on. It's a little scary. It's
such a good trail though. Like
it's
that
beautiful.
Trail like just makes me smile to think about it. It's my favorite type of downhill to run.
There's less built-in stairs compared to South Kaibab.
Yeah, and I like South Kaibab too, but I didn't. Again, like it's rentable for me, but it's technical. Where I technical enough where I feel like I have an advantage over some people who aren't good at technical trail. Yeah.
So I was waiting down at the bottom, well, actually even farther in after, I think it's Manzanito, I believe, is the last water stop. And I was in the middle of the canyon, and you came, flying through. And from there, you have a nice gradual downhill towards Phantom Ranch. It feels more flat, and there's still some uphills, some little punchy hills, but generally it's downhill and it's not technical. It's more you have to fly.
Yeah.
I mean, I was splitting some low 7-minute miles, and you were already, almost 30 miles in, 36 miles in by the time you get to Phantom Ranch, 37 miles in, so well over 50, 55K, and you've done all this vertical, and you're splitting low 7-minute mile pace. It's starting to get warm. The sun's out. How were you? What was going through your mind at that point, going back towards Phantom Ranch there?
I was feeling strong for most of it, but a lot before Phantom Ranch, it's not that I was feeling like my body was failing, but mentally I was feeling a little bit out of it just from putting in such a hard effort the entire way.
Yeah, and I could tell you were dialed and focused. We'll run some YouTube, the video clips there. You were looking strong. You were running fast, but I know what it feels like to have that 55K, that 34, 35 miles in your legs.
Yeah, it's like I knew I could still run a little bit, but I barely had the energy to say anything to you. Like I didn't even want to talk.
And I think the most sobering point is when you get to Phantom Ranch, you still know you have this 7-mile or 11K climb.
It's like a 6-mile climb.
For Phantom Ranch, it's closer to 7 miles.
Ranch,
yeah,
but it's still flat.
Yeah, Phantom Ranch, it's still a little flat, and then you get up to the bridge or the river, and you have about a little over 6 miles to the top. But it's almost 5,000 feet of vertical, and you're staring up this wall of switchbacks of dusty stairs.
You just don't look up.
And knowing from the splits that a lot of the top women have run, I knew you had to do it significantly under 2 hours. And I believe when we hit the bridge, we were at 5 hours and 50 minutes, or did I say 5 hours, 40 minutes? I think on Strava, you ended up splitting about a 150 for the final push up, which is not easy. We came out of the tunnel there, and we started hitting the switchbacks, and it's dry and dusty. There's these stairs. It's a very steep gradient, and I'm struggling to run, and and Sandi's running it. I'm thinking, gosh, this would usually be like most people would definitely be power hiking this, but Sandi's gritting her teeth. She's running a lot of these steps that are up a very, very steep grade, and knowing that you've put in all that vertical, you've already climbed the North Rim, you've already done a lot of downhill, you're almost 40 miles in, and you're really pushing yourself. It was really impressive to see. She was running these gradients where it's like right at that trade-off where you're like, maybe I could go faster if I power hike, maybe I should power hike, but I'm going to fight through the pain, I'm going to grit my teeth, and I'm going to put in a running motion because I think I could go marginally faster. And we knew, it might come down to a matter of minutes, but you're not sure because you're still almost 2 hours out and you still have this thousands and thousands of feet of climbing. Of course, we're going up a couple of switchbacks. We're splitting some 14, 15-minute miles. The pace is starting to slow. The effort's getting really, really hard. And I look up and, I kind of had smelled them ahead of time. I had seen some puddles of what I thought was urine, and it confirmed that it actually was, as well as some fresh droppings. The undeniable smell of a mule train. And of course, we hit these switchbacks a couple miles up, in the middle of the climb, narrow part of the trail, no pull-off spots, right? Narrow part. And there's 2 mule trains in front of us going. The mules are clopping around real slow. So we come up behind them. And, I think I made the mistake of telling you that you had 4 miles to go. You really had less than 4 miles to go. We were pretty demoralized with that. Could you give us an update on what was going through your mind there?
When we saw the mule train, I recognized that it was part of running fast in the canyon. Like, I know Kat Bradley, she had experience getting stuck behind the mule train. I'm not sure about Ida, but I just knew like the only thing I could do was stay calm, realize it's part of the experience, and just wait it out until we got our chance to move past them. Like, obviously it sucked. Like, I knew I was really close to Ida's time, and I knew that time was costing me, but you have to focus on what you can control and just kind of let go of what you can't.
Yeah, and the thing with the mule trains is they don't run on a real set schedule. It changes over the time of the year. They're bringing supplies back and forth to Phantom Ranch, I believe. These were not mules. They were hauling things. They weren't hauling people. And we start early in the morning to avoid them on the downhill. But when we're coming back up 6 hours later, they're also heading up from Phantom Ranch. So last month, we'd started earlier. We started at before 5 a.m. And so when we were coming back through Phantom Ranch, we actually hit them right after Phantom Ranch, and they were able to pull over right away. You hit them right before the bridge, I think. Maybe you had to wait a little bit, but it just depends on when they leave Phantom Ranch and exactly where on the trail you hit them, because some parts of the trail are very narrow. There's cliffs you could literally fall off and die, or it'd be very uncomfortable to pass a giant mule with all its supplies, especially if you're passing like 20 of them. It's even hard to pass groups of people, especially on a busy Sunday like it was.
What did the ranger tell us when we asked what time the mules leave?
He said the mules leave when they're ready to leave, because they determine their schedule. And we knew going down, the mules don't like to leave in the dark. They usually don't want to go down in the dark because it's kind of treacherous. They're switchbacks. I don't know, maybe the mules don't like the dark. It's cold. So it's easy to beat them at the start, but it's harder to beat them on the way up from Phantom Ranch. And you don't know if the mules are being stubborn that day. Maybe they left a little bit later, right? So we hit them at a pretty bad spot. I mean, I think if we had left later, we would have hit them maybe when they were at Skeleton Point, and they would have been in this big clearing. They would have been off to the side. We wouldn't have had to slow down at all. But as it was, we hit them in a narrow spot, some narrow switchbacks. They saw us coming. They were very nice to us. They pulled off eventually. But we were walking very slowly behind them, and it definitely is a factor. It's part of the risks of the canyon. If you're going for a record run at the canyon and every minute counts, you know that weather could be a factor. You know that mule trains could be a factor, and it's kind of just luck of the draw with the timing when they could pull over and when you could pass them, because the mules are stubborn. They'll kick you if they don't like you. And
they're cute. They can't help it. They're working hard to go down to the canyon and back.
They're slow, though. They are slow.
Well, they're doing a lot of weight,
They're clomping around, and they were going a lot slower.
Just doing their job.
They were going a lot slower than you were going at the time. So it was a discouraging thing when you're fighting for every minute.
It was discouraging. But, and again, like the guys leading the mule train were very kind and polite, and they wanted to let us pass. They just couldn't because it was too narrow.
Yeah. And the mules don't know what's up either. But
they're just doing their thing.
Yeah. And, ideally, we weren't going to do it on a weekend day. We weren't going to do it on a busy Sunday, the weekend before Thanksgiving. But that's just the way the timing worked out. So, of course, you're doing the last couple miles. You're pushing hard. You dropped me. I was off the back. I couldn't keep up with you. I bonked, dehydrated.
It's really hard to...
She's flying. So I got the clip of you pulling away there the last couple of miles after Skeleton Point. And I'm looking at the clock, and I know it's going to be really close. But there were quite a few people milling around the last mile of the Grand Canyon. It does get quite busy. It's a great national attraction. But on a Sunday, I think you were facing more traffic than if it was a weekday, of course. So, ideally, it wasn't ideal, but, that's the way it is. And, so many people were super encouraging, even for me, going as slow as I was after you. But there were definitely, there's people to weave through, and there's some kind of sketchy parts where it does not feel comfortable to weave through people when you're trying to finish as fast as you can.
No,
you gotta be polite,
I don't really think it slowed me down. It just, I don't know, I'm sure I look like a freak to some people, why the hell is this woman pushing so hard and barely able to talk? Although when you're in the Grand Canyon, if you're thinking about going yourself, it's so important to be polite to everyone you see, so runners don't get kicked out of the canyon. And just as a person, you just be nice to people.
Yeah, that's general trail etiquette. And yeah, like she said, it's, because it's becoming a more popular thing for ultra runners to do rim to rim to rim, we want to make sure that we keep the trail running. You always be polite to people, and especially because it's a privilege to run there, and it's a beautiful place. And you realize that, most people aren't going to be they're going to be hiking down a mile or two from the top to just check out the trail.
It's important to remember that most people don't know trail etiquette because they haven't had the luxury to spend a lot of time on trails. They might not even know trail running is a thing. So it can be frustrating not to have people realize like, oh, you need to stay on the right side of the trail and pass on the left. But, if a lot of people just weren't exposed to trail etiquette when they were younger. So it's not their fault. So I had to keep that in check as I was going up.
Yeah, I mean, you have international visitors from all around the world visiting this attraction. And, some people, you get the real surprised response that they see someone running. At the same time, it's becoming more of a common thing, I think, and more people are trying, at least maybe running down to Phantom Ranch and back, rim to river and back, or, rim to rim. Some people start in the North Rim and they end on the South Rim. You got to plan that out logistically with a shuttle, though. And at this time of the year, we knew the shuttles weren't running from the North Rim back to the South Rim, and it's like a 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive. You have to go way around. So if people are thinking about doing rim to rim to rim, you definitely want to plan out those logistics and plan on taking it's an ultra. It's a tough ultra.
There's actually
the
a really
temperature swings are
informative
huge.
Facebook page. I think it's just Grand Canyon rim to rim running maybe, and there was actually some really good information on there.
Yeah. So again, I just wanted to answer some of those questions, but you're coming up to the finish, last couple miles, it's going to be close. You're looking at your watch. We got, there's some film clips of that on the Rabbit video. What's going through your mind at the last mile or so?
Well, I knew the last mile I was off the time, but it didn't matter. Like, I had set out to run as fast as I possibly could, and so for me personally, the only choice was to keep running as hard as I possibly could, and that's what I did. And I ran when I could. I definitely took a few hiking steps just because I couldn't run up some of the steep stairs anymore. But yeah, I ran as hard as I could till the very end, and I was happy with that. And you have to be like, I think when you sign up to be a runner, you're going to miss goals and you're going to fail. So it's important just to be happy as long as you did your best for the day. And everyone can always do that. Even if everything goes wrong, you can do your best for the day. And sometimes that might mean dropping out or DNFing or it could get pretty ugly. Or sometimes just might be minutes short of your goal.
Yeah. So 7 hours, 33 minutes, 5 seconds.
Yep.
About 3 minutes and 49
seconds
off of the FKT, second fastest all time. A really great time, really great performance, and you gave it your all. Definitely really impressive and inspirational to see. Think about trying it again? That's one of the questions on Twitter.
Yes, definitely. I don't know if it'll be anytime soon, even within the next couple years. I think I kind of know where I need to improve. And I also acknowledge even before I started the Grand Canyon that I was training for the North Face, which is as a significant amount of vertical, but at the same time it is very runnable compared to what I'm used to. And so I didn't feel, it's not that I wasn't prepared for the Grand Canyon. I just felt like I would have trained more specifically if I would have had that in my mind for a couple months or even weeks beforehand.
Definitely. Yeah, the course profiles are quite a bit different, and the atmosphere is a lot different. And yeah, you were coming off the Rut 50K and coming off of racing shorter distances. I mean, even World Mountain Running Champs was it was only 18 miles, right? You were doing some shorter speed stuff most of the year. So this was like the big ultra focus, really.
Yeah, and coming from the summer of mountain running to the North Face, I had switched my focus to focusing on a lot of more road workouts and flatter stuff, and I reduced the amount of vertical I was doing compared to the summer.
Yeah, so quick Patreon question. You took the Arthur Lydiard certification course to talk about aerobic base building periodization. This actually goes back to my last podcast, episode 23 on the Sage Running podcast here. The question was, should we not cross the lactate threshold to do any high intensity in base building phase? Mainly keep it as easy aerobic running, easy pace running, strides, maybe some light fartleks and light marathon pace work, but nothing like over the high intensity threshold, over 85-90%. How long do you abstain from that kind of thing? I have my own opinions on that as well, but
Yeah, I think we could both get into this because
that could be a whole other talk.
I
actually.
agree with so much of the Lydiard ideas, but at the same time, I also acknowledge some of the other experts out there and some of the latest research. And part of that question, it depends on what part of the base phase you're in. Like if you're just starting, yeah, you might just want to be doing a lot of easy miles and building back up and adding in some strides. But if you're in a little bit later, then maybe it depends on the runner. Maybe you could add in some faster stuff. And it depends if you're injury prone or not. Because I have had athletes do a lot of sprints and shorter speed workouts, but more fartlek style, not focusing on pace earlier or more like towards the middle or end of the base phase. And I think if you're durable enough to handle that can, when you enter like the more like longer workouts, you're already running faster because you did that speed workout. You did those speed workouts. And especially like if you're an ultra runner and you took your off season, then you're building back up. I think it's important to go back to that short speed and regain some of that you may have lost during your ultras or even mountain races before you get into longer stuff again.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, that's part of the any service, any distance philosophy, periodizing your year, types of races you're doing. And then with like, if you're looking at like a philosophy like Arthur Lydiard versus a Jack Daniels distance running formula, right? You see this early phase 2, right? You're doing hill sprints or short hill reps, and it's more for running form and running economy, your efficiency. And you're doing these pretty fast, high-intensity bursts, but they're short, and they're not designed to generate a lot of lactic acid. They're not like hard VO2 max workouts. They're more like form and efficiency, strengthening to stimulate.
And it changes your muscles by doing that.
Fast twitch muscle fiber activation, increasing power in your stride, increasing leg turnover, getting that stride rate. I mean, if you're doing a stride or a sprint, you're well over 200 steps a minute, whereas at most race paces, you might be closer to 170 to 180 steps per minute. But you're getting that spike with fast leg turnover, doing hill sprints, stimulating fast twitch muscle fibers, activating the glutes, working on that spring. And you see that with the base phase and the hill phase, as well as like a Jack Daniels reps phase where maybe you're running 200-meter repeats on a track, or like you said, doing a light fartlek with 1-minute surges, 2-minute surges.
And I will say with like the Lydiard fartleks, he did that a lot in the base training phase, and it was all based on like how you were feeling for the day. And so if his athletes felt really good during a scheduled fartlek early in the base phase, they could run pretty hard. But if they felt a little tired, they'd back off and take it a little easier. And so I think I think that's what people struggle with now because they're so focused on looking at their watches and paces. But Lydiard and his athletes in that time, they weren't worried about that kind of stuff, especially in the base phase. And so I think it allowed them to be more in tune with their body. And so when they were in the base phase and doing the fartleks, they were able to listen to what their body was telling them. And so if they weren't feeling good, they wouldn't care if they weren't hitting a certain pace.
Yeah, you don't push too hard over the threshold, basically. So 85-90% of max heart rate for extended periods at a time. Because of that high intensity and a high duration, you could induce some lactic acid, get a pH drop in your blood. And basically the saying goes, if you can't burn out till you catch fire, well, you can start catching fire with a lot of lactic acid, doing a lot of hard VO2 max repeats, and then running your easy days too hard and doing, high intensity stuff all the time. It gets you in really good shape really fast for a couple weeks, maybe a month, but then you're going to fizzle out and burn out and lose all those aerobic gains in fitness until you reestablish base. So that's the whole idea with the easy pace running aerobic base, but also mixing in what we call alactic speed work, working the fast twitch muscle fibers without developing high amounts of lactic acid. And that could be a whole other talk. So, but you're going to be in that situation soon. I'm taking a break now after this great season, winning the Rut 50K, doing this Grand Canyon run while doing 2 rim-to-rim-to-rim runs in the last 2 months, and taking a break and then slowly building back. So you'll be getting into the off season, so to speak, a little bit, but you're going to limit it a bit because you want to build on this fitness level, right? And
yeah, but at the same time, what I've noticed with the athletes we coach recently is we're lucky enough, well, maybe lucky is not the right word, where a lot of our athletes ended their seasons on a really good note, running PRs or just really good times at ultras. And they're like, I want to maintain this fitness even during this break where I'm not racing a lot. And I think that's the wrong mindset. I think it's important to realize that sometimes it takes losing a little fitness to gain fitness. And we see that a lot with athletes who've raced a lot or just train all the time, and they get injured and then they come back stronger after they build back up from that injury. And I think like you don't have to get injured to experience that boost in fitness. You just need to take an off season seriously.
Definitely the fitness ebbs and flows, and you can't be burning it hot 100% of the time, or eventually you're going to break or have some inconsistent race performances. But the goal is to stay healthy so you could stay consistent and train at a pretty high level most of the year. But like you said, it's all about the timing and periodization, focusing your training, and you've been a good example of that. But yeah, it's just part of the sport. So thank you so much for your time on here. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Thanks for having me. I don't know, it's always awkward talking about myself. So next time,
Working on mystery.
Yeah, when I just have my schedule, but we'll have more guests on the show as well. I want to thank the Patreon supporters for really revitalizing the Sage Running podcast with this new equipment and gear and getting us motivated to do more podcasting in the future, as well as YouTube videos. Again, check out Sandi's YouTube channel, Running Wild to Believe. Also check out our coaching website, sagerunning.com. We sell training plans for any service, any distance. You're going to have some new announcements, more plans coming out. Anything else you want to add with the Sage Running coaching and support? Thanks to your sponsors as well.
Yeah, thanks for listening to my boring talk about the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, it's phenomenal performance. Again, you can check out those links to the video and her blog that she wrote for on the Rabbit Media, your sponsor. Thank you again. Be sure to subscribe on here. Subscribe to the podcast. It should be on iTunes here if you're listening it in a different place. But thank you guys. Really appreciate your support. Hope your running's going well. Thank you to Sandi for being on the show, and definitely stay tuned for more Sage Running podcasts.
Yeah.